you want to stay. Okay, so let me, with that, introduce Jennifer Dyan Ghoston. Jennifer is an adoptee in reunion with both sides of her birth family, both her birth mother's side and her birth father's. She's been connected to the adoption community for over a decade. In 2015, she self-published her book, The Truth So Far, A Detective's Journey to Reunite with Her Birth Family. And I think she's going to be doing a book giveaway this evening later. Jennifer is also featured in Jean Strauss's film, A Simple Piece of Paper, and you can find that online as well. Her continued efforts to be, I love this, open, honest, and public with her adoption experience has led Jennifer to hosting a podcast, Once a Time in Adopteeland. And I'm honored to be one of her most recent guests. I think that just went online about a week ago. You can find out more about Jennifer on her website, and I'll be putting the link to Jennifer's website in the chat as soon as she gets started. And with that, I'm turning it over to Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Betsy. Oh, it's so good to see everybody here. So many familiar faces, and I appreciate you signing up and coming tonight. So 30 minutes seems like a long time to me to talk. And I don't know, I'll try to cover 30 minutes. I would really like to get the questions that you might have. So I may not talk for 30 minutes. I thought I would break it into three segments, I guess, sections. So the first will be about 15 minutes, maybe, like what's happening with the podcast Once Upon a Time in Adopteeland at present. And then for maybe 10 minutes, talk about before the birth of Once Upon a Time. And then maybe 5 minutes on a part of my adoption story and wrap it up that way. So I wanted to just get like thumbs up. How is everybody feeling? Are you feeling good? Good, good. I'm feeling really good too. Might have been listening to the Nina Simone song before I got on here. I don't know, but I guess we can, I can get started. So as an adoptee, I've had the awesome opportunity to take part in virtual meetings with Adoption Network Cleveland in 2021 that were informative, interesting, and enjoyable. I've seen familiar and new faces of all members of the constellation. Each person, whether they speak or are simply present in the virtual space, have added to my belief that we are all participating in the community together for the purpose of taking a path toward healing from a trauma. I especially like the Monday evening speaker series, where I've learned so much from the likes of Patricia Martinez-Dorner, Ann Fessler, who wrote one of my favorite books that I read when I first got connected to the community, The Girls Who Went Away, and Damon Davis. I enjoy his presentation on here too. And I'm honored to be in their company among the many others. So I thank you again, Betsy, for inviting me to be here tonight. So in preparing for today's presentation, I've reflected on my objectives in order to share them here with you this day. I desire to inspire, edify, uplift, and encourage all of you, no matter what part of the constellation that you belong to, because we all have so much to give each other and to the world at large. We all have gifts to offer beyond the adoption community. And if one person understands the true narrative of our experience, then the sharing of our story is well worth it and not in vain. So present day, Once Upon a Time in Adopteeland. So my podcast is a 1-year-old toddler next week, next Wednesday, March 16th. And I chose this date because it's my birth mother's birthday. So over this time, more than 60 guests, adoptees and adoptee allies, accepted my invitation or contacted me to share a part of their adoption journey. And some are here tonight: Cynthia, Tina, David, Alice, Dave, Sarah, David Boyle, Nomi. I don't want to leave anybody out. I'm just looking. Barbara Robertson, yes. Kate Murphy, I see I see your name. And I think that's it so far. I hope I didn't leave anybody out. But they said yes to a conversation with me because I wholeheartedly believe what Mary Herbert, an adoptee, posted on her @Because Adoption Instagram page. Storytelling is healing for the listener and the storyteller. So I'm gonna start with a typical day. Like I get up at 5 a.m. pretty much every morning and I take a walk for at least an hour. So I do anywhere from 3 to 5 miles. And then I return home and have a cup of coffee. And then depending on the day of the week, as a one-person team, I work on editing, production, inviting guests, recording with guests, chatting before scheduling a recording with a guest, and anything that might come up related to the adoption community. And I spend a couple of hours pretty much every day on something. So I want to talk about my guests. And I acknowledge several people here tonight. But every Tuesday, a new episode airs and can be heard via my website, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts for free. And people from all walks of life and lived experience is what makes listening to everyone's story fascinating to me. We usually agree that being an adopted person is complicated and complex. And I like Barbara Robertson's word, complexicated. Two of my guests have been from another country, Peter from Australia and Julie from Scotland. My youngest guest is 21 and the oldest is 84. And despite generational gaps and differences, many have so much in common, separate from their shared experience of relinquishment, foster care, and adoption. And I want to tell you about Jessica. She's 31, so she's young enough to be my daughter because my son is 31. And she had never shared a part of her adoption story publicly before now. And during the recording, she said, I'd like to read a poem. And it's entitled The Legacy of an Adopted Child. And I was thinking, I know that title. And then she said, the author is unknown. And in my mind, I thought, I absolutely know that poem. So she begins reading it. She reads it beautifully. And I actually tear up while she reads it because we're a generation apart. And the poem resonated the same way for her as it did me, so much so that I did include it in my book. It's on page 31. So some of my guests have never shared a part of their adoption story publicly before now, and it's a pretty big deal to be visible, not hidden any longer. I strongly desire that we mustn't vanish in the confusion of our circumstances. We all have contributions to make an adoption land. I ask guests to start from wherever they wish and share however much or little they choose about their lived experience. And I strongly believe that oversharing is potentially unhealthy. So listeners of my podcast have the opportunity to hear from adult adoptees and adult adoptee allies. And I'm thinking of my Aunt Juanita right now, who is not adopted. She's not an adoptive parent. And yet she faithfully listens because she wants to hear our stories. She wants to learn. And most people either tell me that they learn something new or they feel less alone in the world. Being able to listen in on a conversation between two people, known and unknown, is an opportunity to understand some of the things that are shared behind closed doors. Being the fly on the wall, so to speak, opens up the chance to gain insight that otherwise might not happen. So I've been told that in the audience tonight, people are from Ohio, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, California, New York, Virginia, Illinois, Arizona, Wisconsin, Massachusetts, Maryland, Florida, Alabama, Washington, Pennsylvania. Wow, that's a lot. That's wonderful. And Tennessee. And from Tennessee would be me. So I'm gonna tell you about myself as a conversational podcaster. For 50 years, I called my birthplace of Chicago, Illinois, my home. And my 27 years of experience as a Chicago police officer, 16 of which was as a detective in the Violent Crimes Unit, has truly prepared me for having one-on-one conversations with other adoptees. For me, in law enforcement, to get people to open up and talk, hopefully be truthful, it's no small feat. They first had to trust me. People want to talk about what happened to them, and it's a matter of who they want to do it with. So I set a goal of at least 100 episodes for a few reasons. Number one, to know my level of commitment to this project with the adoption community. Number two, to give as many adoptees as possible the opportunity to share a part of their story. And number three, to help listeners navigate their journey, whether an adopted person or not. And on a side note, when I considered who was my audience for my memoir, I settled on the adoption community. That makes sense. But it turns out that many of my readers were not a part of the constellation. A large number of readers shared with me that they didn't have a clue about some of the issues adoptees face under a closed system when seeking information about our adoption. So while storytelling can be healing, it is also informative to others who don't have the same experience as an adopted person. So I believe the best way to get started in telling your story, I believe this was a question that was asked, is to put pen to pad, writing a part of your story down in a journal, even a voice memo, or by any means necessary to get it out of your head. Then edit, re-edit again and again and again until you start to identify a flow to how you want a reader to feel about your journey. I usually create an outline once I determine what I want to convey to my audience. Once all of that is completed, and it took me about 5 years, then there is the next choice to publish your work or not. I'm a big fan of self-publishing while totally understanding a preference of traditional publication. The framing of storytelling absolutely affected my perceptions and ability to handle challenges. It's sort of like seeing the glass half full versus half empty. For example, during the roller coaster highs and lows of my search and reunion, I continually leaned into focusing on what was possible versus what was not. I would encourage an adoptee to look at the parts of their story that empower them and start there. So the phrase I first heard Rich House and Sarah Easterly say, "Write from your scars, not from your wounds," is another way to put it. When the bumps in the road happen, acknowledge them, take a break if necessary, and then keep going, keep writing. So this is an appropriate time for what I call an interlude, because this was a major part of last year, simultaneous with the podcast. The Adoptee Voices writing group created by Sarah Easterly became a part of my journey while working on Once Upon a Time in Adopteeland. And when Sarah asked me to co-facilitate online for 8 weeks with her, Rich House, Alice Stevens, and Kate Murphy, it was easy to say yes. The chance to help other adoptees write and craft their stories was an opportunity of a lifetime. It turns out that I could juggle both, podcasting and being a part of a writing group. Adoptee Voices has allowed me to meet and enjoy adoptees, share their words, and supporting each other. It is a most rewarding experience each week. My many writers have gone on to publish their beautiful pieces on the Adoptee Voices e-zine and be a guest on my podcast. So currently on Mondays, Sarah created a space entitled Honor Your Voice for adoptees to write from an emotional playground. I liken it to the recess time during my school day curriculum. As a little person, when my classmates and I We're also excited to take time to play and enjoy being a child. So now I want to talk about before the birth of Once Upon a Time in Adopteeland. In 2015, upon completing my book, I was unaware of any members of my paternal birth family. A DNA test put an end to that, and by June of 2017, I was in reunion with extended biological family members. I wanted to share being in a full circle reunion through a different medium. I didn't want to write another book. I wanted to create a theater play. So in 2019, I co-wrote the script with Tony Roper, entitled Meant to Be. It evolved into an audio drama and was birthed in 2020 as a result of me pivoting during the pandemic. What is an audio drama, you ask? It is a story played out by talented actors through dialogue, sound effects, and music to create a visual picture in the listener's mind. Another definition is a purely acoustic performance with no visual components. Actors with scripted scenes in my story recorded together at a professional studio here in Nashville, Tennessee, which is home to some of the best sound engineers in the world. And so a big shout out to my sound engineer, Charles Yingling at the Blue Room Studios, who worked with me and cast members for hours to produce a quality of work that makes me proud. He edited the episodes and encouraged me every step of the way. The audio drama can be heard on season 1, episodes 2 and 3. I quickly learned, though, last April, that an additional platform for adoptees to share their stories is a valuable resource to our community. And real quick, for the name and logo of my podcast, I focused on my ideas through the lens of a little person again, my inner child. I always enjoy hearing stories that started with Once Upon a Time. I always thought that it was going to be a special journey into the life of the main character. It seemed to never disappoint, and I was catapulted into another world, especially if there were things I could relate to in their adventures. So I enlisted the aid of a graphic designer on Fiverr for the logo. I told her of my vision to have 2 trees to symbolize what we as adoptees in our life have in our life. It only took a few images for me to decide on the one you see. The font for the words and the tree drawing side by side feels calming and yet suggests storytelling time. I envision being outdoors in nature while listening to the words of another person affected by loss and grief. Last but not least, through the years, people have told me that I have a soothing and comforting voice. The next logical step was to honor this God-given gift and share it. So I contacted Damon Davis, the host of Who Am I Really, the podcast, for guidance. He was eager to help me. We put our heads together, and in no time, I was ready to launch my podcast. I was eager to take the show on the road because guests can be from all over the world. I've been a guest on Damon's show and knew how vulnerable it is as an adoptee to be public with sharing our journey. I also remembered in 2020 when I again decided to be transparent with Haley Radke, the host of the podcast Adoptees On. It was another opportunity to be open, honest, and public. It was freeing, and I was thankful for the invitation she afforded me during that time. So now I had some tools of how to approach being a host and a podcaster. I've sat where each guest sits and know how difficult, yet healing and beneficial it can be to take on the role of storyteller, side by side with, in front of, or on the phone with a listener. In 2021, upon being a new podcaster, I reached out to other adoptees, adoptee allies, known and unknown, to be a part of my platform. And every time it makes me emotional when I think of the overwhelming support I receive from members of the adoption community to help others. Nearly every guest expressed that their why is that at least one other member of the constellation, especially another adoptee, might be helped by their words. That's just who we are. That's how every one of us is. We are interested in being a part of doing the work to lean into healing, ourselves along with another person, from a shared experience of relinquishment and or abandonment. A win-win, I call it. So with that being said, I know that it's through recognizing our differences that a new level of powerful healing is possible. We don't have to carry our load alone. On the podcast, it is my new hope and interest in how our differences can bring us closer together. Empathy, because of having shared experiences, is an apprenticeship to compassion, according to the poet Mark Nepo. But true maturing in compassion is opening our hearts when we don't have things in common. For that reason, I'm in agreement with Betsy that having space for all members of the constellation at the big table during the same time is an ideal situation. So now I want to talk about, just 5 minutes, my adoption journey. I was born in 1964 and given the name Bonnie Lynn Upshaw. I was in foster care at 4 days old and remained with the Smith family for 2 years. I was permanently placed for adoption by 1967 with my Gostin family and given a new name. According to my adoption decree, it was a final decision. I am a same-race domestic adoptee, and just because I fit in with the Gostins, it didn't negate the missing piece of genetic mirroring. I had a happy childhood with 2 loving parents. Still, on at least 3 separate occasions, I told my mother that I wanted to know my birth mother. And she asked, why would you want to do that? And in my head, my 12-year-old head, I asked, why wouldn't I want to know my other mother? I caged my curiosity for many, many years. So fast forward to 2010, Illinois changed the adoption law. By 2011, I was allowed to request my original birth certificate and subsequently learn my birth mother's identity, Wanda Nell Upshaw. I was told within 24 hours that she had died in 1996 on her 49th birthday. I found my brother, who was born 22 months after me and had been raised by our mother. I often think that my birth mother wasn't able to raise both of her children. I met extended family one after another, but my dear precious Aunt Juanita was the first person I met. By 2015, I self-published my memoir, and by June 2017, through a DNA test, I found my paternal side. My birth father, William Gilmore, had been deceased since 1990, but extended family members, especially my cousin, Michelle, lovingly shared what they remembered about my dad. And I'm going to share a story with you that caused a really great connection between Michelle and I. So Michelle is the first grandchild. She's a year older than me, and she grew up not knowing her birth father. In 1990, when my birth father died, she was 27. And at the funeral, during the repast, she was making a plate. And this man comes up to her and taps her on the shoulder. And he says, "I'm your father." She drops her plate. She runs to our grandmother, Janie, and she says, "That man just said he's my father." And our grandmother, Janie, said, "Yes, he is." So that story, when I think about it, when we talk about it, it always makes me feel like a deep connection because of her experience at my birth father's funeral. Just knowing who I am biologically related to provided valuable answers to my many questions, and for that, I'm forever thankful. So this was another question that was asked. The best part of my search and reunion was receiving my original birth certificate and learning my birth mother's identity. And also a close second is learning that I was known about through the years by maternal birth family members. The worst part was finding graves. Both birth parents lived short lives. So in conclusion, I believe what a dear friend, Eileen Abrams, who happens to be a birth mom, reminded me of the other day We don't get over what happened to us. We learn to live with it and manage it. And being connected to the adoption community for over a decade has helped me to lean into healing from a trauma, a primal wound, as Nancy Verrier describes in her book, and help others to do the same. A happy or enjoyable life, in my opinion, is one that is meaningful, rewarding, and purposeful. I believe everyone is doing that by your presence here tonight and all the other ways you are a part of our community. Adoption Network Cleveland is a tremendous value and resource. This organization is a powerful movement for adoptees, birth and adoptive parents. And make no mistake, there is an adoptee movement going on right now, and I'm glad that we're all a part of it. I set the intention to stay connected with ANC, regularly tell others about it, and be a lifelong supporter in as many ways as I possibly can. I thank you, Betsy, and the entire team at Adoption Network Cleveland. I appreciate you so much. Thank you, attendees tonight, for being here. And I truly hope something I've said resonates with each and every one of you. And please know that if you want to be a guest on Once Upon a Time in Adopteeland, there is room enough for everyone. And I extend the invitation to you right now. I'd be honored to hear your story and be trusted with it. And feel free as an owl to reach out to me. So my book giveaway tonight was suggested by one of the most generous people I know with her time and words, who happens to be an adopted person, my dear friend Tina. So I know I have 4 names. I guess I'll start with the first one, Betsy.
So I had Jennifer choose numbers from our registration list so that we would have a random winner. And just in case the first person wasn't here, Jennifer chose a few different numbers. And I think the first person is here. So Catherine Russell, are you here? I thought I saw her name.
I'm here.
She's here.
Hi.
Okay.
Hi, Catherine.
Hi.
So you're the winner of Jennifer's book.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited.
So
Yeah,
we'll
thank
have to
you.
exchange information.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
I'll just have to get where you want me to send it to.
Or do you want me to message that?
Betsy, how should we do that?
I probably have I think during your registration, so if I have your permission, I'll share your address with Jennifer.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thanks.
I'll be mailing that this week.
Thank you so much.
You were registered number 3. So that was Jennifer's first number, was number 3. So Jennifer, I have a question. You talked about the play that you have done that launched during the pandemic and several other things. Is there, and maybe I should know this if it's all on your website, but is there one place where all of the links of all the things that you're involved in are in one place?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my website can take you to the podcast site, and I was trying to think what else. Yeah, I think, yeah, my website, JenniferDyanGhoston.com can link you up with everything.
Okay, because yeah, somehow I don't think I even knew about the play. I know I haven't seen the play, so.
Yeah, so it's an audio drama on episode 2 and 3 of season 1.
Okay. Good. I'll watch for that.
Oh, Sarah, I see you said that was all Ridge House. The right from your scar, not your wound.
Yeah, that was from Ridge. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
I quote him all the time. It was really good advice.
So if people have questions for Jennifer, feel free to put them in chat and I will pose them. Jennifer, I loved what you said about learning to live with things that have happened and, kind of our reality, and manage it versus, being just focused on getting over things. And, as an adoptee who's been in reunion for longer than I wasn't, so since 1986, however many years that is, it's a long time. And, doing this work for the last 33, 34 years, at one point, I think that was my goal, was to just kind of get over the impacts that adoption had. Some of them, the ones that were most difficult. And, somehow over the years, I've come to grips with that of, it comes back up, and learning how to manage it, learning how to identify it, having that self-awareness is really important, but they're not things that are necessarily just going to go away. So that's powerful to always be reminded of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been really studying more about the stages of grief, anger, denial, bargaining, depression, and accept. You could be, say, good, acceptance, we'll say, for years, and then all of a sudden be sad, move around to one of the other stages. So I think it is a matter of managing and living with what has happened. And I think that's a really good question too, that people are starting to ask, instead of saying what's wrong, what happened. It's not what's wrong with a person, it's what happened to a person.
Yeah. And I like the concept of both and, that, you can have had a happy childhood in your adoption, and you can have some impacts from adoption that are difficult at the same time. And I think we all have a lot of both and things in our journeys. So we have one question. Jennifer, you say that you believe there's a movement in the adoption community. Where is it that you see it going, and where do you see us going on a national platform, and what's needed? Big question.
Yeah, that's a big question. Well, the reason I say that I feel there's an adoptee movement going on right now is because so many adoptees are becoming visible, speaking up, sharing their stories, and being just really upfront and center, so that all of us in the community can see them, but also for someone else that's not a part of the adoption community, because I have no way of knowing who's listening to my podcast. It may be people that are not a part of the adoption community. But back to the question, where do I see it going? I see that the narrative is shifting. People are understanding that the narrative that we've been hearing for a long time isn't the entire, that's not the total picture. It's not even the correct picture many times. And I'm thinking of Jessica again, who shared that she reached out to some company or some place that does reunions, and she wanted to be a part of it. She shared her story, and they told her that wasn't, that didn't sound like it was going to be a happy ending, and they weren't interested in, and how, first of all, how that made her feel, how it makes all of us feel to think that our stories aren't worth TV space, so to speak. And it's because all the endings aren't happy. I mean, they're not always ideal, and that is still the narrative. And I think that's starting to come out a lot more now as we, speak up and we tell our stories, so that people know what all of adoption looks like, not just what these happy endings that they want to put on TV. So I think we are moving in a good direction. the younger generation is really, they're quick. They're addressing things. My youngest guest, Sydney, 21, she is making a film about being a transracial adoptee and interviewing other transracial adoptees and getting it out there, what that experience is really all about. I hope I answered the question.
That's interesting that you touched on the happy ending thing. You know, I think sometimes people, I've heard say that, you know, some adoptees speak out because they didn't, like, it's not a happy story, or there wasn't a happy ending. One person years ago once said to me that they thought I'd started the adoption network because I had a happy ending in my search and reunion. And, you know, and my response was really, it's not about a happy ending, it's about the truth. And, you know, obviously as an adoptee, you're kind of leaping off the cliff, not really knowing what kind of ending you're going to have, you know, when you make that leap and start seeking information. And, you know, it had to very solidly just be about the truth for me. I think that's probably common. We have a question that was shared, I think direct message to me in chat. I'm curious about what advice you have for adoptive parents who also, quote, match our son in terms of race, that he knows and sees his racial identity in our family as you did in your family. So what advice would you have for adoptive families?
Okay. Is that question in the chat?
No, it was sent to me as a direct message, actually. So it's in my chat, but not.
Okay, so is this the same race adoptee? Is that, did I understand that correctly?
Yes. So I think it might be a multiracial family that has a multiracial child who's the same mix of race that he would have been if he was born in that family. If that matters.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure if I understand the question, but I'm gonna go for it. I think an adoptive parent needs to find out as much information about the nationality or the ethnicity of the child they adopted. And be a part of what that means. Be a part of that culture, find out as much as you can about that child's identity. What if they had been raised with, we'll say a Black child had been raised with a Black family, what would that probably look like? You know, what would that Black child be experiencing in terms of food, in terms of music, in terms of just anything that's of the Black culture? You know, I've had transracial adoptees tell me who were raised by white parents that they did not get any exposure to Black culture. They didn't know, like, the movies I was watching and the things that I was doing as a child into teenage years, and none of that, they didn't get that. So an adoptive parent, I think it's critical that they find out as much as they can about that child's background. You know, if their parents were whatever nationality, what would it look like? Randall Pearsons of the world. Yes.
So to take that question deeper, I think that the person asking was also asking about the flip side of that. So, you know, if their child mirrors their racial heritage, then do you have any advice for them, you know, beyond what you said?
So So I'm not clear. Are the parents white and the child is of another ethnicity?
So the child is of the same ethnicity as their parents.
Okay.
And the parent is asking if you have any advice for parents who match their child in terms of race. I think we talk a lot about transracial adoption or transcultural adoption. And this parent's asking about same race adoption.
Okay. I'm going to say this. I was same race. My mother knew nothing about how to do my hair texture, how to work with my hair texture. There were plenty of things, even though she was a Black woman, that she didn't know, because all Black people aren't the same. And so I would say that even though it's same race, it's still important to, and I'm guessing this adoptive parent does not have any knowledge of the background, I guess, of the adopted child, correct?
I'm not sure exactly.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I can answer that. I really don't know. I just know from my experience, there were things about me that my mother, even though she was a Black woman, wasn't able to do. She had to go out and get the information. She had to find out how to do different things, even though I was a Black child. And I did actually fit in, but there were still different things about me that she had to go find out about. So I guess maybe that's my answer to an adoptive parent.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you still have a lot to learn and a lot to check out and look into, even though it's the same race. I'm sorry, I misunderstood that question completely.
I'm sorry, yeah, maybe I wasn't clear, I'm sorry. Thanks. So Barbara was also calling out, I think when we were talking about the adoptee movement, to also include DNA surprises, donor conceived people, that there's a lot of similarities. And I know Adoption Network has expanded our program to encompass, we actually have legislation that we're working on here in Ohio about fertility fraud, which some people look at as, and why is the adoption group after this legislation, but it's about truth and genetic identity, and so it's parallel to our issues, even though it's maybe a different twist and turn a little bit, but it's got more in common than it doesn't, I think. So that's an interesting expansion of the movement, I think. What other questions do people have? What else do you want to know from Jennifer?
Okay, Damon says, what are some things you've learned about adoption from speaking to your 60 plus guests? Yeah, I've learned so much. I think one of the biggest things I've learned is from late discovery adoptees. I know, having talked to Cynthia and Deborah Spera, who are on here, and Alicia, I guess I had never thought about this other layer, like unnecessary layer, that they have had to experience and really, I guess, work through and still are working through, I'm sure, because it brings up this subject of trust. And I remember Cynthia telling me, you don't know who you can trust, even the people you can trust. And trust is a pretty important thing in all of our lives. I mean, and so that's probably been one of the most profound things I've learned, because they're such superstars, like, and yet they've been through that added layer. And Deidre too. Deidre was on here, I don't see her. but I've learned a lot from late discovery adoptees, and I've also learned a lot from transracial adoptees. Yeah, so that's my answer, Damon.
I'm on. I'm here.
Hi, Deidre.
Hey, thanks. Hey, everyone.
Hi. So interesting that Damon asked that question when Damon was our guest on Monday evening, almost a year ago, I think. His subject was what he had learned from the multitude of different interviews that he had done. And he came with several lessons learned, one of which was about the relationship or lack thereof between adoption and abortion, which is our topic next week. And he's one of the panelists on that topic. So that came out of this. Actually, we've got at least two of our people on that panel here with us this evening, Lorraine and Damon. So tune in next week for that. So a question about what are some essential resources that people that have been most influential in supporting your identity development with regards to adoption? What essential resources or people have been most influential?
Yeah, so when I first got connected, I was attending conferences. So back in 2011, I started there, and also reading a lot of books. As I mentioned before, Ann Fessler's The Girls Who Went Away was, I felt, a very essential resource to me because it gave me a chance to get a glimpse into what it must be like for a birth mother. And so several books, I just devoured book after book back then, and even still today. As far as people that have been influential, I would say, oh wow, people that I met at the conferences, and I'm thinking of Jean Strauss right now because she's a filmmaker, wrote 2 wonderful books that helped me that I read years ago. And I just spent a lot of time with Jean back in 2011 and 2012 when she was doing the film, A Simple Piece of Paper. But there's so many people that have been very influential. And I think if I go back even before the adoption community, I had an aunt who was really a great mentor to me. She truly supported the idea of me finding my birth family. And so she passed in 2014. So she knew I was in reunion with my maternal side and was still cheering me on to be in a full circle reunion. And my kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Webster, she was very influential. I remember her like it was yesterday.
Thank you. We've got 2 more questions in chat. That's probably going to be the last ones because we're going to bump up on 9 o'clock here in a minute. So one of them came directly to me. How do you feel about the common narrative in adoption that your birth mother, so this is in quotes, your birth mother placed you because they loved you so much? How does that affect identity or sense of self-worth?
Yeah, I don't really remember hearing that growing up. I really don't remember that. And then, so I don't like it. I don't like that one for those that got that, because it just doesn't sit well with me. But
Makes love sound pretty dangerous.
yeah,
They loved you so much they left you.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense to me.
Okay, and then we have another question here. From my experience in being an international transracial adoptee, it's important for adoptive parents who are adopting to be educated in all aspects. So maybe that's more of a comment than a and a question. Some shout outs for how wonderful a simple piece of paper is. So you'll all have to check that out. I believe that Jean has all of her movies posted for free on the internet. So if you Google Jean Strauss, you will get a treasure trove of wonderful adoption films. And Jennifer's story is really well portrayed in that movie. What would have made sense to you if, so, you know, if that she loved you so much doesn't sit well? I guess that's in relation to explaining why a birth mother would place a child. Do you have any thoughts about that?
What would have made sense to you if she loved you so much doesn't sit well? What would have made sense to me? The truth. Like in my situation, my birth mother was 16. You know, she didn't make the decision. Her mother, my grandmother, made the decision. Her parents made the decision. They felt that that was the best decision. And I don't, you know, I just don't, that's what they felt. You know, whether I agree, I understand. Did that answer your question? Is that Lorraine?
Yeah.
Yeah, the truth is what makes sense. I might not like it, but the truth sits just fine with me.
I think there's a big difference between explaining that your birth mother loved you, if they know that's the truth, versus she loved you so much she gave you up. And so, you know, that she loved you can be part of the story, but there's a lot more. It's a big oversimplification, among other things, to leave it at that. You know, she loved you so much she gave you up.
Yeah. Yeah, the wording of that is off.
Okay, well, we just have a couple minutes left. Any quick last questions before we wrap up? Okay. So I'm going to wrap things up here. Let me, Jennifer, thank you so much. It's wonderful. And it's funny that you said that so many people have said about your soothing, calming, gentle voice. That's certainly been my experience. You've got a wonderful voice to listen to, and a wonderful way that you put things. I really appreciate you sharing that with us tonight.
Thank you, Betsy.
Yeah, so really great to have you. As I think many people know, Adoption Network Cleveland is a nonprofit organization serving individuals and families impacted by adoption, kinship, and foster care through support, education, and advocacy. And to find out more about our organization or to support our work, you can visit our website, which is adoptionnetwork.org. It's part of most of the links that I put in there this evening. We are a membership organization, and we hope that you'll consider joining us as a member. And we also hope that you will join us next Monday, the 14th, to hear about adoption and abortion, whether they're seen as two sides of one coin or whether they're two separate coins. That'll be a very interesting discussion. And you can check out our calendar for lots of different programs in between now and next week and then beyond. So thanks for coming this evening. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I really appreciate it. Good seeing you. Have a good night.
Good night.